Life can be lonely sometimes, and making friends as an adult is tricky. I know it all too well. I moved away for college. I've lived in 3 different cities post-grad, which is crazy. And I even had a personal identity crisis where I had to redefine myself entirely and start over. So I know a thing or two about this. I've been the type of lonely where you're crying in bed because you don't have anyone to text. And I've also been the type of lonely where you're surrounded by a bunch of people, but you look around and you realize no one truly knows or cares about me at all. Reese commented a really thoughtful question on my recent video about intentional living, asking about how to build deeper friendships when you're a recovering people pleaser and you're experiencing burnout. Guilty as charged. It is such a good question because there is a huge difference between making friends and making deep, fulfilling, substantive friendships. The ones that just fill you up and you leave that hangout walking away feeling so content and like, wow, that was awesome. And then you both text each other and you're like, oh my gosh, was that as good for you as it was for me? I love you so much. Those are the type of friendships we're talking about. It can feel challenging and weird and awkward at first, but it really is a skill that you can be intentional about and get good at. So today I wanted to get really personal with you guys. I mean, I'm currently in an entirely new city and having to make friends again, so I am in the same boat. I want to tell you my story and some things that I've learned that have really helped me cultivate the skill of building just great, fulfilling, colorful communities. This may be a longer chat, so grab a tea and let's gab. By the way, my name's Kate, and on this channel I talk about intentional living, financial literacy, and media and tech literacy. And yes, the bangs are new and I don't really know how to handle them yet, so we're figuring that out together. We're working with what we got today. When I think about it, it is kind of crazy the amount of times that I have had to start over, make new friends, build new communities. And I think I've picked up little skills and tips from all these different eras of my life of doing this and iterating on this over and over again. So while I could make a video that's like 10 tips to make friends in college, I feel like that would be inauthentic, and there's just so much more fluidity to this. And I want to focus on the things that really make the biggest difference for me now at this age and stage of my life, as I have gotten more intentional about where I'm placing my energy and who I'm choosing to surround myself with. I went to college knowing completely no one at the school that I was going to, but in college, you are almost forced to make friends by being in such a condensed setting, especially if you're living in dorms or sitting in big lecture classes. There's also a ton of community building that goes on through extracurriculars that are offered or joining societies like Greek life. So in college, I wasn't particularly discerning about who I was choosing to give my energy to or who I was spending my time with. I was definitely very lonely my freshman year of school. I was hanging out with people, but I feel like I hadn't found my people, and it took about a year for me to finally start to feel comfortable with some of the people that I was spending time with. But honestly, in college, I was not as intentionally minded as I am now when trying to find friends that really align with my values. The learning really started when I moved to LA post-grad. Here I was in a new city, and for the first time in my life, I think I really felt truly crushing loneliness. The type of loneliness where you don't want to leave the room in your apartment because you don't want to face your roommates because they don't really feel like true friends to you. You literally don't want to go outside because seeing people who are hanging out in the park and they're with their friends reminds you of the fact that you don't have any friends. The weekend's rolling around and you have no one to text and no plans, and I guess you're just gonna stay inside in bed again. Like, that was the level of lonely and sadness and depressed that I felt. I was also really burnt out because of very crazy toxic work environment, and I was so starved of having friends and having community that when I did start to make new friends or at least meet new people, I was not very choosy about trying to find people who aligned with my values or uplifted me or weren't rude. I was just happy to be spending time with anyone. I was so excited to finally have people to go to things with, finally have people to party with. But in retrospect, this was almost a recipe for disaster. Because I had been so starved, I just accepted the first attention and friendship that I could get without really realizing some of these people were very toxic and very misaligned with my core values. I go into this a lot more in my intentional living video, but then around my mid-20s, I came to a period where I intentionally withdrew and for the second time in my life, put myself into a period of loneliness. And this time it was on purpose because I realized that the people that I had been spending my time with, even though they might be considered friends, and technically I had people to do things with, and I technically was in group chats, it was very unfulfilling, not deep at all. And honestly, some of the people were mean. And I'm a kind person. Like, I don't want to surround myself with people who are that type of negative energy. All this is to say, periods of loneliness are not only normal, but they're actually really, really helpful. Firstly, everyone is feeling this way. Loneliness has been on the rise. It's definitely an epidemic, especially when you consider the fact that our societies have gotten more isolated, with certain areas being less walkable, and of course with our phones and technology, but I talk about that in tons of other videos. It's hard not to feel lonely when you are addicted to doom scrolling. But especially in periods of your life where you are experiencing growth or change, maybe you're in a different city, or maybe you're just starting to realize that you're maturing a little bit faster than some of your other friends. Maybe you're outgrowing some of your family relationships or your hometown. In these transitional stages of our lives especially, this loneliness can actually be so good for us. First off, if you're alone, this doesn't necessarily mean you have to feel lonely. You might be in a period of your life where you're spending a lot of time with yourself and you're pretty solitary, but that sadness and loneliness is honestly just a mindset that you're having about this period of time. When I was first experiencing it, it brought me into the trenches. Like, my depression has never been worse. But now that I've been through it a couple times, I have had the experience to realize every phase of life that is like this and has this period of immense loneliness is temporary. And that's so much easier to say once you have experienced it a time or two. But honestly, it's like heartbreak. It's the first one is crushing and you think your life is never gonna recover and you're never gonna get over it. And by the third one, you're kind of like, I know what I'm getting myself into here. You're like, yeah, this is gonna suck for 6 months, and then things will start to feel a little better. These lonely periods are like that. So if you are in a period where you are alone, I would instead try and reframe this as a time that's an opportunity to get super clear on what you want in the type of friendships and people that you have around you. Especially as a chronic people pleaser and someone who is able to be a chameleon in a lot of different social situations, I was incredibly out of touch with myself, and this was reflecting the type of people that I was surrounding myself with. So when I did have these opportunities of lonely periods where I was spending a lot of time solo, I actually was able to dig deeper into myself and start to understand my own values, what I wanted out of friends, whether I wanted a certain type of community, and just to develop a stronger sense of self. When you have low self-esteem and not a true sense of who you are and what your core drivers are, people can not only take advantage of this, and I definitely had this happen when I was so starved and just kind of like following along people who were rude and mean. And without realizing, you can also really give yourself up to someone and latch onto someone in an unhealthy way. I found myself doing this in my early relationships because since I had been so starved for attention and connection and depth with someone, because I had been a chronic people pleaser and I had never really let anyone get to know the true me, when I got into my first relationship, my poor first partner, honestly, he had to deal with the fact that I relied on him so heavily and I clung to him in such a codependent way because I had never let anyone in before. And so I just put this insane burden on him to be my best friend, fill up my cup every day, fill that void of emptiness and loneliness that I had inside me. And needless to say, it didn't work out. And from that experience, I learned that this is why you need to have a community. You need to have multiple people that you can be your true self with and feel comfortable with, and have people that you feel connections with and you can lean on each other. It shouldn't just be one person. That is too much of a weight for anyone to carry. And that was a lot for my people-pleasing, codependent self to learn. So during these periods where you are alone, focus on getting to know yourself and getting clear on what you want out of your friendships. And instead of feeling so excited for the first people that you start to spend time with once you are getting out of that period of loneliness, instead recognize the fact that you might just have been starved for so long that you're excited to have any type of connection. And really, you should be very intentional here about trying to save your energy for those really good, deep, meaningful friends, not just random people to spend time with. Lean into that lonely period. Lean into it, figure out yourself, and then come out on the other side ready to build intentional, awesome community. Building friendship is most certainly a skill that takes time and practice. I did not get good at this at first. I feel like it took me making those mistakes multiple times, like latching onto random party friends in LA and San Francisco, leaving behind certain friends and then realizing, oh wait, those were my real people. I need to go reconnect with them. It takes trial and error to figure it all out, and you're going to learn and improve over time. And it can feel really awkward at first, but I swear it gets easier. Something that's gonna help is really getting comfortable, getting uncomfortable. So normalizing putting yourself out there and putting yourself into little situations of discomfort. If you're in a space where you've literally been so lonely and you're kind of feeling disconnected from the world in general, something that has really helped me in these periods of time is getting comfortable. And guys, don't knock it till you try it. Don't get mad at me yet, but getting comfortable with small talk. And I know this is a controversial one, but it was one that really has helped me over the years. I view small talk as practice for the real deal. Practice for when you're really wanting to make friends. Because learning how to have a conversation with someone, learning how to talk to a random stranger, that's a really helpful skill to have. And if you have that skill, when you do start to meet the people that you actually want to become friends with, it's going to be way easier and feel way less awkward. So something that I love to do and has been really helpful for me is make the small talk with the people that you interact with in your daily life. And if you're not interacting with people in your daily life, turn off the Instacart and get yourself to the actual grocery store. Delete Uber Eats and make sure you're actually going down to the local coffee shop. When the barista asks, "Hi, how are ya?" and they're like not expecting a response, they're just waiting for you to give your coffee order, you're gonna stop and you're gonna respond to them. Like, it's been kind of a slow morning. I gotta deal with work soon, but how are you? Make sure to ask that question at the end. Make sure to ask, how are you back? That just opens it up for a little bit of chit chat, a little bit of small talk. Not everyone's gonna receive this, but every once in a while, you might just have a really nice little conversation. You'll walk away feeling a little bit happier and a little bit more pep in your step. You might have made that person's day. They might have just had rude customers all day long, and you were the first person to actually ask them how their day was going. And even though this felt like a bit of an awkward interaction, what it really was practice for when you are out, meeting a friend of a friend for the first time and you have no idea how to have a normal conversation. Chat with the cashier at the grocery store about whatever you're buying. Just try and integrate these types of small conversations as much as possible throughout your day. And it's going to make it so much easier for when you actually are in situations where you really want to have that conversational skill. Once you've developed that initial skill of just learning how to small talk, learning to pick up random conversations with people, then you're ready for phase 2 of putting yourself out there, which is going to be things like joining random clubs in your local community, going to volunteer, saying yes to when your kind of weird coworker invites you to a party where you're not going to know anyone. It's these type of situations that might feel kind of awful to actually go to. Like the amount of times I have not wanted to go to something, but I have just forced myself, push my anxiety aside and force myself to get out there because you never know who you're going to meet. that is a really valuable thing to start to learn how to do. Some of the places where I have been able to build community pretty quickly through putting myself out there, they've been different things at different periods. In LA, I was doing a lot of job-based stuff, picking up random PA gigs where I didn't know anyone, but you're always gonna meet a bunch of cool people on set because it's kind of brutal, but it's also kind of fun. You can become a regular at a bar. I have done this and made some friends in the past that way. I put an asterisk on this one because I do think you have to really be down with an alcohol-driven culture to want to make friends at a bar. I found my bar friends personally to not be the most deep because the only times we would see each other would be in drinking contexts. So take that as you will. Maybe it's for you. The best group of friends and some of the closest friends that I have ever made, I started to make through joining a trivia group. It was certainly out of my comfort zone, joining a group where I knew no one. But the cool thing about joining something like a trivia group is there is also repetition and consistency built into seeing people. We did trivia together every single Tuesday, and through that repetition, you just start to get to know people over the weeks. And then after around 2 months, you've started to figure out who you actually like from this and who you might want to friend date. And then someone randomly invites you to a party and they have friends. All you need is one person to be that connection friend. If you make a connection with one person, you never know what world they could open you up to. When I moved to San Francisco, I didn't really know anyone, or the people that I did know, I wasn't super close with or aligned with. So I actually just decided to join a random apartment that had 4 other girls in it. And I became really close with one of my roommates, and she had some coworkers. And one day, for some reason, the 2 of us were out at a park, and a coworker of hers happened to be at the same park. That coworker had a bunch of friends. We decided like, hey, let's just go try to meet some people. I met all her coworker and her friends, and I really liked some of those people. So from that interaction, I then got to meet a couple new people, one person who became my like connector friend to a bunch of different scenes in San Francisco. He became one of my longest standing friendships from my entire 4.5 years being there. And that's actually not without a period of about a year where we had grown apart in some ways. And I was starting to do my intentional journey where I wasn't partying as much and stuff, and he was still pretty into that. But then we came back together because we had maintained that friendship even on the back burner. And he introduced me to a bunch of people, and that's eventually how I met some of my most core people and got this random trivia group invite. So it only takes one, and you never know what like weird 6 degree of separation. It was my roommate, my random roommate's co-worker's friend who then invited me to a trivia thing, and then I met like some of the people that I love the most in life. You never know what that chain of events is going to be. Hey, it could even be with the barista that you have the small talk with. Like, you literally never know. So you have to be open to those opportunities and putting yourself into those uncomfortable situations, pushing yourself out the door, and just being ready to make that random connection with whoever it may be, while also being intentional about trying to find people who do align with your values. And the thing is, this is not going to be an easy period of time when you are starting to try and put yourself out there. Something that is really important to remember is you are not going to be everyone's cup of tea. If you're everyone's cup of tea, you might be people pleasing, and you might want to check that out. But if you are staying true to your true self and trying to show up as your most authentic self, you are not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And that is A-okay. If someone doesn't like you, you just gotta let it be. It's not worth your time or energy to try and change someone's mind about you. People want different things out of their friendships. People want different things out of life. And we're all on different timelines and different journeys, and it's just not gonna click with everyone. The sooner you realize that, and you realize, hey, I don't need to be trying to be a chameleon and people please for everyone, the easier it's gonna be to find that true deep group of people. Another thing that was really crucial for me when I was starting to try and be more intentional about creating and cultivating community, more so than even making friends, I'm the type of person who craves community. I want a friend group. I want a scene of people that I can feel connected to, and like we all can share in different experiences together. If you want to find something like this, you are going to have to be intentional. You're going to have to be active. It is so important to learn how to take initiative if you can. If it's not too anxiety inducing, but I do think it's worthwhile to try and do, is learn how to be that person who sends out the random text to casually invite people to things and start to try and build that cadence that's going to turn into friendship. I was extremely aggressive in doing this. As soon as I kind of started to figure out, especially I'm speaking from my post-intentional personality identity crisis shift that I experienced in my life. After that, when I was starting to make these like quasi friends from my trivia group, there were a couple of them that I was like, I want to really be friends with you. And so what I would do is I would invite people to do something with me that I was going to be doing anyway. This makes it super low lift and low stakes for people to come join if they want to. If they're busy, they don't have to. And your ego doesn't get bruised if you're going to end up there alone or with only one other person who showed up. So my big things were like on a random Saturday, I would grab a book, I'd grab a blanket, I would say, hey, I'm going to the park and I'm going to go read. Feel free to join if you want to. And you might be there for an hour before anyone decides to show up, but you would be surprised if you are feeling lonely and like you want to make friends and you're starting to get inklings that there might be some cool people that you're starting to meet and you have a couple people that you want to reach out to, chances are they might also be open to making friends and in the market for building community. So by being that person that takes the initiative and shoots out the group text and says, hey, I'm going to go do this thing, like join if you want, but no pressure. One, everyone will start to gravitate towards that very open and assertive energy. And two, you just never know who might show up and who might also really be craving that as well and may have also been spending their Saturday alone inside. Like it's such a shared emotion that we're all feeling. It's funny that we're all feeling crippled and wanting to stay alone inside when really all it takes is just one person sending out a little feeler text like, hey, want to go to the bar? It's like a Thursday night. Like, let's go have a little thirsty Thursday. I'm going to be there either way. Show up if you want to after 7 p.m. It's funny being that proactive person, but it is just such a great way to start to build these meaningful connections because you are now the person who's trying to facilitate building this community, and then you get to set the tone and the scene for the hangout that's gonna be. So if you want it to be at a random park, if you want it to be at a bar, these are some of my favorite because they are just very low lift. It doesn't take a lot for someone to want to get out on a sunny Saturday and go to a park. And then once you're there, you can start to make friends. And then once you start to do this, and if you're starting to have some success and it seems like people want to hang out with you, the thing that's really gonna sink it and solidify those friendships is, again, that repetition. So trying to make it that every Thursday night you go to the chill dive bar and you play some pool and it's going to be a routine thirsty Thursday. Or every Saturday you're going to be out at the same park and anyone can pull up with a couple beers or a speaker or some, non-alcoholic beverages and just be ready to have a good time. Being proactive, being intentional, being the one to send out that text and then making it a repeating habit, repeating almost a hobby. Yeah, that's another word that could work there. That is really going to go a long way when it comes to building that community, making those friends, and starting to find those really deep, meaningful connections that you do crave in life. And if you don't have that connector friend and you don't know where to even start, then starting with things like sports leagues, volunteering, church, trivia nights, there's so many different little community activities that are already out there, and you can go to it and say, hey, I actually hate soccer. Why on earth am I playing rec soccer? But if you go to a couple of those soccer games and you meet one person and you kind of like them, then just steal that person and say, hey, let's go on a park coffee walk. Like, you don't have to keep doing soccer. Just find those couple people who also only join soccer to make other friends and then just like move that out of the activity into start whatever you want to start doing. A funny thing about friendship that I feel like we don't realize when we are in school age and we kind of take friendship and relationship building for granted. Friendships take work. and you gotta foster them and you gotta maintain these relationships. It's really important to learn how to nurture your friendships, especially if you want to have longevity in your friendships. And this is going to require avoiding getting complacent. And I think that is something that I have certainly struggled with over the years, especially given the fact that I have moved around a little bit. I have to really go out of my way to make sure that I'm keeping up with and maintaining my friendships. And I'm not always the best at this. I actually just had a phone call last weekend, gabbed with this girl, love this girl for 2.5 hours, but we hadn't called for a full calendar year, I think. We had maybe shot each other a text or two, but it was one of those ones where we were like, we're not letting this happen again. And this time I am going to be serious about it. But even when you're in that early stage of building friends and starting to make friends, or you think you might have someone who you kind of want to make a friend, you got to realize that it is going to be work. It's like a relationship. It's going to require some work here and there. It's important to do things to stay connected. So checking in with people regularly, trying to find little hobbies that you can share, even if it's just like playing chess.com against each other on occasion, trying to schedule those regular meetups, like I was saying before, or just every once in a while, especially if these are long distance friends, just shooting them a text being like, hey, I saw this thing and it made me think of you. Something that's going to make it easier to maintain and really foster and nurture these friendships in a way that's going to be deeper than just random people that you get to spend your time with is you're going to have to be vulnerable and you're going to have to open up and get personal and get deep. Don't do it too soon, not on like the second friend date hangout. Don't be like, okay, now tell me about your deepest childhood trauma. But pretty early on in the relationship, if you do want it to be one of these deeper connections, I think it's important to start to sprinkle in a little bit of vulnerability here and there, or start to ask slightly deeper questions. This will set the precedent that that is the type of friendship that you want. And if they aren't really willing to go that deep with you, then hey, maybe this is a nice person, a nice acquaintance, but they're not going to be your deep, close, personal friend. But if they start to open up and get comfortable with you, and then you start to get more comfortable with them, this is where it's really going to click and you're going to be able to go deeper and deeper and deeper over time. But it's all because you started planting the seeds and watering the seeds early on. A funny thing about friendships too is they are going to change over time a ton. Your friendships throughout your life are going to ebb and flow, and especially the longer term friendships that you want to foster and maintain. Things happen. Life happens. Someone's going to get in a relationship and be so in love that they kind of forget to spend time with you for a year, and then all of a sudden they're going to come back and realize, oh wait, I got to start to spend time with my friends again. Things are going to be really busy and draining at work for someone, or someone's going to go through a personal crisis and they're going to have to focus on themselves for a while. Someone's going to mature and get to a different life stage, like get married, start to have a kid, when someone else might still be in that full swing party stage. Everyone's lives are changing constantly, and humans are dynamic individuals. I don't know if you guys ever have this experience, but I had this vividly at my office building today. I literally work on the 46th floor in Midtown Manhattan, and I was just looking out at all of the office buildings around me, and I was staring out the window, and I was just thinking to myself, there's probably someone else who's staring out a window right now and thinking something similar to me, but two, there's, probably thousands of people in the office building that I'm in right now, which means there's thousands of people in that one and thousands of people in that one and thousands of people in that one. And every single one of us has drama and friendships and relationships and is just living this really unique and crazy life. Like we're all just on this planet together, and their lives are no less full and exciting than your own. But they're a stranger to us, and we may never even cross paths with them, even though they work half a block away from me. I might never encounter that person in my life, but that person's life is equally as full and dynamic and unique as is mine. Sorry, I don't know why I got heated, but I just think about that sometimes. Like, every single person on this planet has crazy drama that they're going through, and they have a weird relationship with their mom, and they're getting over heartbreak. Like, we're all in it together. That's the beauty of the shared human experience. So to bring that back to the actual friendship topic at hand, everyone's living their own lives and dealing with their own shit. And while it's hard to not take it personally when you are at a stage in your life where you might be seeing one friend less because of some reason or another, it isn't personal, and you just have to accept that and let them have a period of time where maybe you aren't hanging out as regularly or as consistently as you would like to. I've had this happen so many times. Like, the relationship one's pretty easy because they'll come out eventually. I've certainly been there. I've been the person who's like, oh my gosh, I don't even see my friends anymore because I'm just so in love. But I think there's also a true beauty to it when you have a friend and you're just maturing at different stages, or your interests are changing, and so you're moving in different directions for a period of time. I had a very dear friend from high school that I love her very deeply. We were a very core, tight-knit group of people in high school. I had, about 5 people that we were ride or dies. And then in college, when we started to come back for maybe like sophomore year, we were hanging out, we started to just have some friction because we had different interests, and we were spending time, we were at different colleges, spending time with different people, exposed to different things, and our experiences just weren't really lining up anymore, and we weren't really meshing together very well. And in this period of time, we actually took a bit of a friendship break, and it probably lasted about 2 years. It was never malicious, there was never any hate, but it just was this, kind of mutual realization, hey, we have to let this fizzle out right now because it's not really making sense for us. Then over the years, we reconnected at some point in time and realized we had grown back closer together and back similarly, and we were just both very open to pick up our friendship again now as these new mature people who had been through these interesting growing transitional periods. And I just think that that is the most beautiful thing about long-term friendships that really have legs and longevity. Things are going to change. People are going to change, things ebb and flow, and you just have to be willing to accept the friendship for as it is at that moment in time. I also had this with my friend in San Francisco when I stopped partying and he was still partying. It was a very similar experience. Sometimes you grow apart for a little bit, and then they might come back around and realize hey, I was actually partying a little bit too much. And you're like, great, I'm here for you. I'm ready and willing to restart this friendship. So that's another reason, even when you do have those friendship breaks, I would encourage you to never be rude about it, or never try and be on your high horse, or teach someone something, or have really high friendship expectations. I think when you have really high friendship expectations, that can put people in a bit of a pickle when they are experiencing these big life events, because they might not be able to meet them. And if you're going to guilt them and shame them for not being able to meet your expectations, really, you're the one who has to realize you got to give people some grace in life. And if you really want to be friends with this person, you have to let them figure out what's going on in their own lives. I think it's important to have really reasonable expectations for our friends and just recognize that we're all human, we're all flawed, and we're all going to go through periods of time where we have to take care of personal matters and aren't going to be able to give as much to this friendship. So you got to maintain it, you got to foster it, you got to try and not get complacent, but you also got to recognize it's never personal, and you can just really meet people with where they're at that moment in time with your friendship. Now, like with any relationship, sometimes you're actually going to experience rejection in friendship. Sometimes people might be in a period of their lives where they're not open to meeting new friends. Or like I said before, you're not everyone's cup of tea and they don't want to be friends with you, even if you might want to be friends with them. If this happens, it's important to just remember it's okay and try and reframe this as more of an opportunity for redirection than rejection. When these type of things do happen, it's a perfect opportunity to focus on yourself, reconnect with yourself, and have that time and energy to give to things that are going to be more closely aligned with your values. And then there are also times in your life where you may have to reject a friend. It's important if you're ever coming into any sort of relationship or friendship or connection with another human being, that sometimes you're going to grow in different ways and things are going to be misaligned and you're going to have to experience a friendship breakup. And friendship breakups are so weird because I feel like they're almost more taboo than relationship breakups in a way. If a friend goes through a breakup of their relationship, their romantic relationship, there's more clear expectations about how this is going to go. There's more heartbreak songs to be listening to. There's more flowers that you can send. It's just kind of this more culturally accepted experience. When it comes to a friendship breakup, it's kind of just this odd thing that no one really knows how to talk about. And sometimes people aren't really, it's kind of got this toxic milieu. And it shouldn't be that way because it is very normal to outgrow friendships, or when you are starting to get more comfortable with yourself and you're starting to form your strong self-identity, you might realize, hey, my values are actually misaligned with some of these people that I've been spending my time with. I've had two pretty pivotal friendship breakups that I've had to initiate over the years. And it's a challenging thing to do, especially when you are the type of person who does really want to build community and does really want to have friends and connections and values long-term friendships. To get to a point where you realize you need to walk away from it is a really hard decision to make. But in the first scenario, the friends that I realized that I had to spend less time with and had to just leave in the past for me, I just came into myself, as I was growing out of my party phase, as I was learning to have more esteem and learning more about my own core self-identity and my own values. I just realized that she was incredibly not aligned with that. And in a very mean and rude and toxic way, she was rude to people, she was unkind, and this really drained me. When I was in that party phase, I was not really discerning about who I was spending my time with. And so I didn't really care if she was being rude to someone, if it was 2 a.m. and we were all just like waiting for a bag somewhere, you know? But when I stopped drinking for that period of time and I started to get more in touch with myself, when I spent time with her after that period, I just started to realize it more and more. I was like, you can't be saying this type of stuff to people. It's not kind. And I wanted to be very choosy and intentional about who I was spending my time with, who I was giving my energy to. And I realized that I did not want to give my energy to someone that was being so unkind to people around her. And this is a hard conclusion, especially for someone who, like me, I feel like I generally give people the benefit of the doubt. I can always justify bad behavior because I'm like, well, I understand they probably just weren't hugged enough as a kid. No, you gotta just be more firm with this one and realize you're not gonna heal this person. You're not gonna change their mind on things. And if they're at this point in their lives and they're still being unkind to people, it's not your job to try and get them to see the wrong in their ways and do better. The second friend breakup was more recently, and this was a case of this friend having incredibly high expectations of our friendship to the point where she would guilt me for whenever I was experiencing something personal and wasn't able to give as much as she wanted to the friendship. She would really get on me about it for some reason. The most vivid and striking example that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I literally had to go home for my grandmother's funeral and she started ripping me one for not being a good communicator and not giving enough to the friendship. And I was like, hey, if you can't realize that this is a period of my life where I need to focus on myself for a second, I gotta be there for my family, and I can't give as much as you are expecting to this friendship, then clearly I'm not fit for your definition and expectations of what friendship are. And that's okay. And we had a very upfront conversation where I just told her, I was like, I cannot meet those expectations. It's okay, but you should be friends with people who can meet those expectations, and I shouldn't be worrying about this friendship when I'm literally with my family for my grandmother's funeral. It is so wild. We're all just human and flawed in beautiful ways. I've also had people friend break up with me, I should mention. The one that really comes to mind is like this friend who was very protective of some of our other friends, and she kind of wanted to create a dynamic where she was like the ringleader of these other friends of ours, and so she kind of iced me out. And it hurt at first. I was really confused, but then eventually you get to a point where you're like, okay, I guess I don't need any of these people. And that is another opportunity to have some time for loneliness and start to really figure out what you want and to build new friendships again. Friendship breakups will feel so much easier, similar to heartbreak, when you have been your truest self the entire time. It's going to sting so much less. If you knew that you put yourself out there and you were your most full and authentic self, and they just couldn't handle it for some reason, or for some reason you've outgrown each other, you've grown in different ways, then you're gonna feel very comfortable and secure in the fact that you no longer have to give that time and energy to that person, and you can reclaim it for yourself, and you can be ready for opportunities to be open to meeting new friends again. A bit of an interesting take that I have on friendships, because of the amount that I value community and I value the ability to build deep and meaningful connections with people, this one's going to be a bit of an uncommon one perhaps. But if you have the means and you have the ability, I think it is fully worthwhile to move to somewhere where you think you are going to be able to build a stronger community. This is not a possible situation for everyone. Moving is really expensive. I know it all too well. You may have family obligations that keep you to your hometown. You may just not have the means to find a job in whatever city you might want to move to. But if you do have the means and you do have the opportunity, I think that there are times in our lives, or there are specific places and environments where building the type of community that I'm talking about isn't going to be as easy. For example, if you're in a rural area, suburban area that doesn't really have good public transportation, or everyone has to get in cars all the time, the spontaneous, oh, everyone want to go to a park right now might not be as achievable. I've never lived in, well, I was about to say I've never lived in a metro area that requires cars. I did live in LA, however, I didn't have a car in LA, so that was a little bit of a funny situation for me. But I've actually never really been a driver. I have always relied on public transportation and have always just tried to be in communities and in areas and neighborhoods that do allow for that type of more spontaneous interaction. Even when I was in LA, now that I think about it, I actually moved to 3 different neighborhoods before I found the neighborhood that I was like, great, this is the neighborhood where I can stay, I can build community for a little bit, and I can have the ability to walk places and walk to my coffee shops and my bars and my park. Like finding that in LA, which is this major urban sprawl, was so vital to me. And this is also like, this can come for cultural reasons too. For example, if you are, in the LGBTQIA plus community and you are finding that you don't have those kind of connections possible in your hometown, moving to a city like New York or San Francisco or DC, my hometown, these are places that are instantly going to be more accepting and tolerant of everything that comes with your lifestyle, and you will be able to flourish in these cities that you may not be able to experience in a more restrictive or conservative area. I've been thinking about this a lot these days as I am in a period of my life where I've also just recently moved. I could have considered moving back to my hometown of Washington, D.C., but honestly, culturally, right now, at this age in my life, I don't think that I really fit in with a lot of the scene that is to be found there. And also professionally, it made more sense for me to go to New York. But I'm really grappling with this on my day-to-day in New York because I really culturally loved San Francisco and I loved being in California. And I felt like this very full and flourishing version of myself in California. And I thought the quality of life was so perfect for me. But I'm pushing myself outside my comfort zone and I'm in a new city. So time will tell if this was the right decision for me or not. But even when I was picking a neighborhood in New York City, it's just like another major metropolitan sprawl. I knew I needed to find a neighborhood where I could see myself being able to build that type of community that I want and crave. And even now, I'm like, I am literally this week joining a running club. Never joined a running club before, but you guys, we're in it together. I'm right here doing this with you. I'm making another new batch of friends because I'm in a new city, and I intentionally picked an apartment that is a block and a half from a park that I knew had a good run club. So like, I am very intentional about creating a space and creating an environment where you can cultivate that community that you crave. And this is going to be very personal and different for everyone. Like for me, it's having the bars, it's having the park, it's having coffee shops, and it's maybe having a concert venue nearby. Like those are my things, but other people have different things that are going to make sense for them in building community around the type of things that you really value. Another thing that's going to make building deeper connections and deeper relationships so much easier is if you genuinely listen. If you start to be able to ask questions, learn about someone's life, and come to meeting someone with a very genuine curiosity about their upbringing and background and what's similar to you, what's different to you, that mindset is really going to make building friendships so much easier. If you come to random people open and curious rather than closed off and scared, it's just gonna be so much more easy and also so much more fun. Like people are exciting. It's fun to get to know different people who have totally different backgrounds than your own. And I think that also ties into the importance of really trying to develop diverse friendships. These type of friendships where people come from different backgrounds are really going to enrich your life, and you're going to learn so much more in different ways. This is something that like I'm just again sharing a personal value of mine right now, but that's something that I value, and I think that it's important to look for if that also interests you. Another thing that's really going to be beneficial if you start to learn to bring this to your friendships is if you are a reliable and supportive friend, then more people are going to start to want to reciprocate that and be reliable and supportive friends back for you. So if someone's going through a tough period in their life, being that shoulder to cry on, or just checking in, just offering to bring them soup or whatever it may be, sending a nice little card. I feel like cards are some of the best things to send, like a little heartfelt card. Oh God, like that's the best birthday gift, is like a card. Don't give me something, give me like a card. Or in like the more positive times, just celebrating wins with people. This is what people want out of friendship. And if you start to model that for others, people will begin to mirror that back to you, at least the right people. When you are also starting to just build friendships from the very beginning, it's important to realize that you're gonna have to go on friend dates. You're gonna have to ask someone to coffee, you're gonna have to ask someone out, but it's not in a romantic way, it's in a friendship way. It takes intentional, it takes being active, but if you are looking for a way to make this feel a little bit less scary, doing some sort of activity like going to a yoga class together or going to a movie together or doing an activity where you don't have to be talking the entire time, especially for those first couple friend dates, this can be a really easy way. And if you're an introvert too, where you don't have to deal with awkward silences, you don't have to talk that much, or just making it like a short coffee gab, like those are just really low lift ways to start to interact with people, start to get to know people, take people out on friend dates before you really start to get to know them. I know that I did this with one of my dear friends in San Francisco quite a bit, whether she knows it or not, but like we did a lot of yoga at first. We would go to yoga classes together. So you get a little bit of interaction, then you have the yoga class, a little bit of interaction afterwards. And eventually we've gotten to the point where like now we'll have hours and hours of just chatting on a couch time. But to get to that level of friendship, you first have to do the yoga dates. Gosh, there's just so much that goes into making friends. It's so crazy. One thing that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, and I kind of teed it up at the beginning of this video, but I do think that if you are addicted to social media and you're spending a lot of time doom scrolling, This is going to hinder your ability to want to take action and ignite yourself and get out the front door, because if you are just constantly consuming, you're not going to be driven to, getting out there, because why would you go out when there's such an entertaining distraction right in your hand? I've been addicted to social media before. I've talked about this at length in another video, so you can watch that. But I do think that if you want to be making friends and putting in that intentional effort, it's going to take time, it's going to take repetition, and it's going to take a little bit less time consuming social media and technology on your phone. Friendship is really a skill, and intentionality matters here when you are wanting to build those communities and deeper connections. When you do have the starts of a friend, you have to make sure to foster that relationship and nurture it so it can grow. Repetition is just so key in having those activities and those spaces and environments where you see someone over and over again, and eventually with that proximity and that repetition, you're gonna be friends. And then not everyone is for everyone. You're gonna face rejection, you're gonna have friend breakups. Being able to embrace that reality and the fact that not all humans get along, and humans are flawed, and we're gonna have different experiences at different points in times and mature at different rates. If you can lean into that and embrace that, it all becomes so much easier. I hope this video was somewhat helpful to start to plant the seeds for you to take small steps to start to build those really deep, meaningful friendships that you want and crave. I know that friendship and relationships and community for me are potentially the most valuable thing in my life. It actually kind of scares me when I see the different YouTube, there's this trend where people are friendless and they're really leaning into it. They're like, I don't need friends, and why do people need friends? And it's good to not have friends. I completely disagree. I think that community is extremely important. I think society has gotten very isolated to a scary extent. And when society is starting to get this isolated, it's just that much more important to be intentional and to seek out building these really deep and fulfilling relationships. It's been huge for my life, for my mental health, and just for having fun and experiencing life to the fullest, at least in the way that I want to. How have you made friends in your life? Do you have any tips to share? Seriously, let's chat about it in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. We'll talk again soon. Bye.